Okay, so, like, picture this, right? You're finally ditching the daily grind, selling everything, and moving to Tuscany to open a cute little trattoria.
Yeah.
Like, serving up all that authentic Italian food. But what if I told you that a lot of what we think of as, like, classic Italian food has a history that's way more surprising and way more um, urban than we'd ever expect?
It really is amazing how our ideas of what's authentic are often shaped more by, marketing and nostalgia than actual history.
Right.
So today we're going to be peeling back the layers of Italian cuisine.
Sounds delicious.
We're going to see how city life, industrialization, and even like a little bit of political maneuvering have all shaped what we know as Italian food today.
I'm already intrigued.
Yeah, and we've got two awesome sources to guide us on this delicious deep dive.
Lay 'em on me.
We're going to be using John Dickey's book, Delizia, The Epic History of Italians and Their Food.
Okay, I've heard of that one.
And then also an episode of the Rest is History podcast where Dickey himself gets into some of these surprising truths.
Cool. So what's the big takeaway here? What, like, surprised you the most from these sources?
Well, it's interesting because Dickey really challenges the idea that there is a single, unified Italian food.
Oh.
He says that Italian cuisine is actually inherently city food.
City food.
Yeah, it was in the bustling cities, not the, quiet countryside where all the culinary innovation happened.
So you're telling me that the classic image of, like, an Italian grandma hand-rolling pasta in some rustic kitchen is, like, more myth than reality?
I mean, those traditions do exist for sure, but they don't tell the whole story. Historically, Italian peasants often had pretty limited diets, and their cooking wasn't exactly known for being super complex. It was in the cities with their diverse populations and access to, a wider range of ingredients where things got really interesting.
Gotcha. So let's talk about pasta. Probably, like, the most iconic Italian dish. I feel like most people grew up hearing that Marco Polo brought it back from China. But Dickey says that's totally made up, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a super persistent myth.
Yeah.
But the earliest documented evidence of dried pasta in Italy actually takes us back to 1154 in Palermo, Sicily.
Sicily.
Yeah. Over 100 years before Marco Polo's adventures, there was this Arabic geographer at the time who described a pasta factory, basically. It was churning out Etria, which is a type of pasta very similar to spaghetti today, and they were exporting it all over Italy.
Hold on. Are we talking about mass-produced pasta in the 12th century? I always pictured it as, like, a homemade thing.
Right. It's wild. It really challenges our assumptions about where pasta came from.
Totally.
And this Sicilian connection highlights something really important about how Italian cuisine developed: cultural exchange. Sicily back then was like a crossroads of Norman, Arab, and Byzantine influences.
Yeah.
A real melting pot of flavors and culinary traditions.
So pasta's history is way more complex than I ever realized.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it gets even more interesting when we look at the role of spices in Italian food. Today, we think of Italian food as like fresh, simple ingredients. But during the medieval and Renaissance periods, it was all about spices. Not just for flavor, but for their supposed health benefits too.
So instead of taking a vitamin, people were just, like, adding a pinch of this or that to their food.
Exactly. People really believed that spices and herbs had medicinal and even aphrodisiac properties.
Wow, really?
We even have this Vatican librarian from the 15th century, Bartolomeo Platina, who wrote a whole cookbook all about the health benefits and, let's say, more romantic qualities of certain foods.
Wait, a Vatican cookbook with aphrodisiac recipes? Now that's something I never expected.
Right. It gives us such a fascinating look at how people saw food back then. It wasn't just fuel, it was a powerful tool for health and pleasure. And speaking of surprising combos, Dickey describes this lavish banquet hosted by Duke Alfonso I of Ferrara in 1529 for his son's wedding. The menu sounds like something out of a fever dream.
Okay, now you've got me hooked. What kind of dishes are we talking about?
Oh man, imagine eel encased in marzipan, white sausages covered in sugar and cinnamon, and then boned capon that's first boiled, then fried, and then, for some reason, blanketed in sugar.
Eel in marzipan. I don't even know what to say to that. Our tastes have definitely changed.
Yeah, what was considered fancy food back then might give us a stomachache today. But Beyond just the weird combinations, this banquet tells us something important about how food was used to show off wealth and power.
Like the Duke was basically saying, look at all this fancy, expensive food I can afford.
Exactly. Food, especially in those courtly settings, was a way to flaunt your status and impress people with rare ingredients. But let's move on from the fancy courts to the bustling streets of Naples, where another iconic Italian dish was being born.
Pizza.
Ah, pizza.
Okay.
That definitely has more humble beginnings, right? Surprisingly humble, actually. I mean, today, pizza is loved all over the world. But it started as simple street food in 19th century Naples. It was often associated with the city's poorer people, the Lazzaroni.
Lazzaroni. I've never heard that word before.
So the Lazzaroni were basically the working class of Naples, known for their clothes and their love of simple food like pasta and, of course, pizza. They were so connected with pizza that during cholera outbreaks, it was even seen as a potential health hazard, which just made its connection to poverty even stronger.
Wow, that's a far cry from pizza's image today.
Totally. But this association with the Lazzaroni is really important for understanding pizza's early history. It was food for the masses, cheap and filling, sold on the streets, and it was so popular that even King Ferdinand V of Naples was known to eat spaghetti with his hands at the opera as a way of showing solidarity with the Lazzaroni.
So even royalty were getting in on the hand-to-mouth pizza experience. That's such a great image. But it also makes me wonder if that royal approval helped to change how people saw pizza, moving it away from its working-class roots.
That's a really interesting point. It makes you think about how food can be used both to reinforce and to break down social barriers. But let's not forget about the iconic pizza margherita. Was it really named after Queen Margherita?
Yeah, that's the story I've always heard. Is there any truth to it?
Well, like a lot of food origin stories, it's a bit murky. The story goes that during a cholera outbreak in 1889, King Umberto and Queen Margherita visited Naples, and this pizza maker named Raffaele Esposito made 3 pizzas for the queen. One had the colors of the Italian flag, red tomato, white mozzarella, and green basil. The queen loved it, and bam, the pizza margherita was born.
It's a sweet story, but is there any proof?
Unfortunately, not really. Dickey's research suggests that while there was a pizzeria owned by Raffaele Esposito, the famous letter from the queen thanking him for the pizza is probably fake.
So another food myth bites the dust. But even if Queen Margherita didn't, officially name the pizza, it obviously captured people's imaginations and became like a symbol of Italian cuisine.
For sure. And that gets at another crucial part of Italian food history: marketing. Italians have been amazing at creating a story of authenticity and tradition around their food, even if those traditions are sometimes more recent than we think.
So the next time I order a pizza margherita, I should be thinking about both the street vendors who made it popular and the marketing geniuses who turned it into, a global icon.
Exactly. But before we get too carried away with pizza, let's talk about another interesting character in Italian food history, Giovanni Rana, the tortellini king.
Oh yeah, I've seen his face on the pasta packages.
He's a perfect example of how tradition and innovation can work together. Tortellini, those delicious little pasta pockets, have been around since the Middle Ages, but it was Rana who took this regional specialty and turned it into a convenient, mass-produced food that people all over the world could enjoy.
Wait, so tortellini wasn't always, readily available?
Nope. It used to be a special occasion food, made by hand on Sundays or holidays. Imagine spending hours making these tiny pasta parcels.
So Rana saw a way to bring this dish to, a wider audience, people who didn't have the time or maybe the skills to make it from scratch.
Exactly. And he was so smart about it. He not only modernized how it was made, but also understood that people needed to trust mass-produced food. So he put his own face and signature on the packaging, basically saying, hey, I stand behind this product.
It was like he was personally guaranteeing the quality.
Yeah, and it was genius. It helped turn tortellini from a niche Sunday treat to something people all over the world eat.
It's amazing how we bridge that gap between tradition and convenience, making it possible for busy families to still enjoy authentic Italian food.
Right, and that really sums up a recurring theme in the history of Italian food: the ability to adapt and evolve while still staying connected to the past.
It shows that food traditions aren't stuck in time. They're always changing to fit the needs and tastes of each generation.
Right. But speaking of tradition, we can't ignore the slow food movement, which seems to be pushing back against this trend toward convenience and mass production.
Yeah, what's the deal with that?
Well, the slow food movement is an interesting response to how industrialized and standardized food has become. They focus on traditional local ingredients and A slower, more mindful way of eating.
Okay, but as we've seen, the idea of authentic Italian cuisine is itself a fairly recent invention.
True.
So is slow food just another marketing tactic, a romanticized idea of a past that never really existed?
It's more complicated than that. While the movement does promote going back to traditional values, we have to remember that a lot of what we think of as traditional Italian food is actually a product of history and cultural mixing. It reminds us that our ideas about food and tradition are always being shaped and reshaped by, cultural forces.
But even if slow food romanticizes the past, it does make us think about the importance of preserving culinary traditions and supporting local food systems.
Absolutely. It encourages us to think about where our food comes from, how it's produced, and the impact of our choices on the environment and local communities.
Wow, this deep dive has already been so eye-opening.
Right.
We've busted pasta myths, uncovered the surprising origins of pizza, and learned how people like Giovanni Rana changed traditional dishes for a modern world. And we've only just scratched the surface.
I know, right? There's so much more to explore as we dig deeper into this fascinating world of Italian food history. And as we dig deeper, we start to see that Italian food history isn't just about ingredients and cooking methods, it's also closely tied to politics and social change.
Interesting.
Food can be a powerful symbol of identity and national pride. It can even be used as a tool for political maneuvering.
You're saying a plate of pasta can be more than just a meal, like it can be a statement. I never thought about food like that before.
Absolutely. Remember the Lazzaroni we talked about, the working class of Naples?
Yeah, the pizza lovers.
Right. Well, in the 18th century, King Ferdinand of Naples would eat spaghetti with his hands at the opera.
Really?
Yeah, it was a way to show solidarity with them. It was like he was saying, I'm one of you, bridging the gap between the monarchy and the common people.
That's pretty clever. It shows how even something as simple as like how you eat can have political implications. Makes you wonder if modern day politicians have missed a trick or two.
Totally. Food and politics have always been intertwined. Take, for example, the fascist era in Italy. During that time, there was a big push to promote a very specific image of Italian cuisine, one that was all about tradition and rural values. It was a way to create a sense of national unity and support their agenda.
So the fascists were trying to use food as like propaganda to present this romanticized picture of Italian culture that fit with their ideology.
Exactly. They pushed this image of the hardworking rural housewife, making traditional dishes from scratch using simple local ingredients. It was a way of idealizing a simpler, more authentic lifestyle that resonated with their vision of a unified Italy.
That's ironic, considering we've just established that authentic Italian food, as we often think of it, is actually a relatively recent invention, shaped by city life and cultural exchange.
Right. It shows how easily these narratives of authenticity can be manipulated and used for political purposes.
Yeah, and it really makes you question what authenticity even means when it comes to food.
For sure.
Speaking of changing times, how did Italian food fare after World War II? Did all the upheaval and social transformations impact their culinary traditions?
Oh, absolutely. The post-war era was a time of huge change for Italy, both socially and economically, and food culture was no exception. People were moving from rural areas to cities to find work, so they had less time and fewer resources to cook those big, elaborate meals from scratch.
So the need for convenience grew.
Exactly, and that's where people like Giovanni Rana and his tortellini empire come in. They were able to meet the needs of a changing society by providing high-quality, convenient food that still had a connection to tradition.
It's impressive how they adapted to the demands of modern life while still honoring their culinary roots. It really shows how resilient and adaptable Italian food culture is. But beyond just adaptation, there's also a long history of innovation in Italian cuisine, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. While Italian food is often seen as being all about tradition, it's actually been very open to new influences and ideas. Just think about the introduction of New World ingredients like tomatoes, potatoes, and corn. At first, people were skeptical about these ingredients, even resistant to them, but eventually they became key parts of Italian cuisine, making it richer and more diverse.
It's hard to imagine Italian food without tomatoes now. They're like a staple ingredient in so many classic dishes.
Exactly. This willingness to embrace new ingredients and techniques has been essential to how Italian food has evolved, allowing it to change with the times and people's tastes while still staying true to its unique character.
That's cool.
But this constant evolution also raises some questions about the future of Italian food. What trends and challenges do you think Italian cuisine is facing today?
Well, it seems like there's this constant tension between, like, preserving those deep-rooted traditions and embracing innovation, especially in a world that's so globalized.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. That tension between tradition and innovation is one of the biggest challenges for Italian food producers and chefs today. It's about finding that balance.
Mhm.
How do you honor culinary heritage while also adapting to changing tastes, lifestyles, and global influences?
It's a tricky balance to strike. You don't want to lose what makes Italian food so special, but you also can't afford to stay stuck in the past.
Right. And then there's globalization itself. Italian food has become super popular all over the world, but that also means it's more likely to be misinterpreted, adapted, and even misrepresented.
So you're saying that what someone might call Italian food in another country might not actually be very Italian at all.
Sadly, that's often the case. You might go to a restaurant in, say, the US, order spaghetti bolognese, and what you get might be totally different from how it's traditionally made in Bologna.
It makes you think about authenticity, cultural appropriation, and how hard it is to preserve a culinary heritage in a globalized world. It makes you wonder if there's a way to protect the integrity of Italian cuisine without stifling its evolution.
It's a complex issue, and there are no easy answers. Some people argue for strict guidelines and certifications to guarantee authenticity, while others are more open to fusion and evolution, recognizing that food cultures are constantly interacting and influencing each other.
It seems like finding that sweet spot, that balance, is key, honoring the traditions while also allowing for creativity and adaptation. But speaking of protecting culinary heritage, Dickey talks about an interesting idea in his book, gastronationalism.
Ah, yes, gastronationalism. It's this idea that food can be used to promote a sense of national identity, to boost national pride, and even to make political statements. It's basically saying, this food is ours, it represents who we are.
So it's like food becomes a tool for nationalism, like culinary flag waving.
Exactly. We see this happening all around the world. Countries use their culinary traditions to promote tourism, boost exports, and even to lay claim to certain dishes or ingredients.
Can you give us an example of gastronationalism in action?
Sure. Think about the debate over the origins of hummus. Both Israel and Lebanon claim it as their national dish, and it's become a pretty heated argument, reflecting deeper political and cultural tensions between the two countries.
It's amazing how something like hummus can become such a battleground for national identity. It really shows how much power food has to stir up strong emotions and symbolize cultural values. And it makes me wonder, has there been any gastronationalism surrounding Italian food?
Of course. The way the fascist regime tried to promote a very specific vision of Italian cuisine could be seen as a form of gastronationalism. And even today, there are debates about the true origins of dishes like carbonara or pesto, with different regions claiming ownership and wanting to be known as the real home of these dishes.
It seems like food is never just about what's on our plates. It's also about history, culture, identity, and even politics.
Yeah.
It's like a window into how we understand ourselves and the world around us.
You put it perfectly. Food is a powerful lens, a way to connect with the past, understand the present, and even imagine the future. And the history of Italian food, with all its twists, turns, and unexpected connections, is a perfect example of this.
You know, as we've been talking about all these culinary myths and historical surprises, it really strikes me how much our ideas of authenticity are shaped by, like, what we want to believe about a culture.
That's so true. We love those simple romantic stories.
Yeah,
They're a lot easier to swallow than the often messy and complicated realities of history.
exactly. And it makes me wonder about other cuisines, too. How much of what we think of as authentic Chinese food or Mexican food is actually, like, based on historical facts versus, carefully crafted stories?
It's a good question to ask about any cuisine, really. Food is so tied to identity, both personal and collective, that it's easy for these narratives to take on a life of their own and hide the true complexities of culinary history.
And as we've seen with Italian food, those narratives can be super powerful.
Oh, yeah.
They shape not just how we eat, but also how we see entire cultures, often reducing them to, like, simplified stereotypes that fit our preconceived notions.
Exactly. Food is never just food.
Right.
It's a way to explore history, culture, politics, and even our own beliefs and assumptions about the world.
Well, this deep dive has definitely changed how I see Italian food. I don't think I'll ever look at a plate of pasta the same way again.
And maybe the next time you're enjoying a delicious meal, you'll find yourself thinking about the hidden stories behind the ingredients, you know?
Yeah,
Think about the cultural exchanges that brought those flavors to your table, the people who have prepared those dishes for generations, and the historical forces that have shaped those culinary traditions.
absolutely. It's a reminder that food is more than just fuel. It's a connection to a shared human experience, a tapestry woven from all these threads of history, culture, and human ingenuity.
And speaking of those threads, we can't forget the role of marketing in shaping how we see Italian food. As we've discussed, Italians have been masters at creating a narrative of authenticity and tradition around their cuisine, even when those traditions are, well, sometimes more recent inventions than we might think.
So you're saying that the image of Italian food many of us have, the grandma rolling out pasta dough, the sunny vineyards, the heartwarming family meals, might be more of a carefully constructed marketing campaign than reality.
To some extent, yeah. Those idyllic images create a powerful sense of nostalgia, tradition, and authenticity that really connects with people. They tap into our desire for a simpler, more connected life, a world where food is made with love, shared with family, and rooted in tradition.
And there's nothing inherently wrong with wanting that, right?
No, not at all.
In our busy modern world, it's natural to crave that sense of connection, authenticity, and a slower pace of life.
Exactly. There's a reason those images resonate so strongly. We're drawn to the idea of a slower, more mindful approach to food and life, one that prioritizes quality over quantity, connection over convenience, and tradition over trends.
So it's not just about marketing hype, it's about connecting with something deeper, something that speaks to our values and desires, our longing for a more meaningful and authentic way of being.
Precisely. And that's what makes Italian food so captivating. It's more than just a meal. It's an experience, a story, a connection to a rich and vibrant culture that, despite its complexities and contradictions, continues to fascinate and inspire people all over the world.
But even with all this marketing savvy, there are still challenges facing Italian food producers and enthusiasts today, right? How do you preserve the integrity of these culinary traditions in a world of mass production, imitation, and ever-changing tastes?
It's a constant balancing act. One of the biggest challenges is imitation. As Italian food has become more popular globally, it's also become more vulnerable to counterfeiting and misrepresentation.
So you're saying that not all Italian food is created equal, that there are products out there pretending to be the real deal, taking advantage of the reputation and appeal of Italian cuisine without actually honoring its authenticity.
Sadly, yes. There are tons of products on supermarket shelves labeled Italian that barely resemble the authentic versions, often using cheaper ingredients and shortcuts to copy the flavors without the craftsmanship or connection to tradition.
So how can we be smarter about what we buy? How can we tell the difference between real Italian products and the fakes?
It's about becoming more informed and discerning consumers. One important thing is to look for certifications and labels that guarantee authenticity, like the Protected Designation of Origin, PDO label, a European Union certification that ensures a product is made in a specific region using traditional methods.
So if I see that PDO label on, say, a bottle of olive oil or a wheel of Parmigiano Reggiano cheese, I can be sure it's the real deal, that it represents the quality and tradition I associate with Italian cuisine.
Exactly. These certifications protect the integrity of traditional Italian food products and make sure consumers are getting what they pay for in terms of both quality and authenticity.
But it goes beyond just labels, right? It's also about educating ourselves, learning about the different regions of Italy and their unique culinary traditions, and appreciating the skill and dedication that go into making truly authentic Italian food.
Absolutely. It's about developing a deeper appreciation for the stories behind the food we eat, understanding the history, culture, and traditions that have shaped Italian cuisine over centuries. It's about being willing to spend a little more for quality ingredients and authentic products, knowing that we're supporting local producers and preserving a precious culinary heritage.
This deep dive has been a real journey. We've explored the myths and realities of Italian food, from its humble beginnings to its global reach, from the bustling streets of Naples to the rolling hills of Tuscany. We've looked at the complex interplay of tradition, innovation, and marketing, and we've gained a deeper understanding of the cultural significance of Italian cuisine, its power to connect us to the past, nourish our bodies and souls, and inspire our imaginations.
It's been wonderful sharing this exploration with you. And remember, the next time you enjoy a plate of pasta, a slice of pizza, or any other Italian dish, Take a moment to savor not just the flavors, but also the stories behind them. Appreciate the history, the culture, the traditions, and the human ingenuity that have brought that dish to your table.
Well said. And on that note, we invite you to join the conversation. What are your favorite Italian dishes, and what stories or myths have you heard about them? What other culinary journeys would you like us to take? Share your thoughts on our website or social media.
Until next time, buon appetito. Enjoy discovering the hidden stories behind the food you love. And remember, food is never just about what's on your plate. It's about the connections we make, the stories we share, and the traditions we keep alive.